Glad you're here with us on Morning Express this wonderful morning. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of September, and it's 2015, and it's lifestyle. And well, on Lifestyle on Wednesdays, we look at relationships, and sometimes it's interesting some of these conversations, how they come up as we're just having our table talk or coffee. And yeah, one of the conversations that came out yesterday is the difference between physical and emotional, or the connection rather, between physical and emotional satisfaction. But then again, satisfaction here is also debatable for men and women. And the women were agreeing in chorus that if their emotional side is not fulfilled, then the physical, and we're talking about possibly their sexual activity, is heavily affected. Whereas there was an idea that this may also be the case for men, or differently. There are some men who are able to separate the two, to compartmentalize, as it were, the two, and have their physical continue regardless of their emotional. Is this just a stereotype? Is it true or not? Let me say at this point that we are going to open the phone lines and would like to hear from you. If you've got a question for our panel and our guests this morning, they are experts in relationships, and therefore we welcome you to have your questions asked. And you can use the trick in case you feel somebody might know your voice. Use the trick that I've heard people say, I'm asking for a friend, even if it's just for you. And yeah, if you have any issues in this regard or regarding relationships, we'll let you know. Also, you can use our Twitter handle, and the Twitter handle is at Michael G. Gitonga. To the guests, and to my extreme left, we have Ken Ouko, who is a sociologist. Great to have you yet again.
Yeah,
You've had a good week?
Oh, yes. Quiet.
Okay, quiet. It's been a quiet week.
Yeah.
All right, we also have Chris Hart, who is a relationship expert. And great to have you as well. How's your week been?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Busy.
Now, your thoughts, Ken, on this particular aspect. Actually, we were just, discussing, and sometimes we take up polls, just a poll with those who we are sitting, and we try and decide, is this the way it is scientifically or not? But what was coming out is that women feel that women are coded such that if their emotional side is not satisfied, physically they switch off completely. Whereas there were those who were saying that for men it is okay, whether if the emotional is not taken care of, they're good to go anytime. All you need to do is, for those, that's their way of doing it, maybe switch off the lights and they're good to go. I don't know, what are your comments?
When it comes to matters of the heart and matters of conjugality, stereotypes are always heavily biased against men. Men always seem to have the short end of the stick.
They always seem to be this animal that just wakes up and is ready to go.
And people say, oh, men are like that, men are like that.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, sometimes the trouble that a man goes through in comparison to that a woman goes through might probably be heavier, much heavier, usually it is, than that of a woman. And to affect him when he gets home, when he's trying to relate, he's trying to be a nice guy, he keeps remembering that evil boss in the office who's telling him, you must get this done. But women never understand that. In fact, the assumption is that whenever the man is not performing, then he's got other interests skewed elsewhere.
They must be getting it elsewhere.
Which is not always the case. A lot of times we tend to favor women, and we tend to give them that BOD, benefit of doubt.
This guy's going to get lynched when he leaves the studio. He won't survive the day.
And let me just let you know that the bigger percentage of even staff here at Standard Media might be women. But anyway, go ahead, just on a light note.
Before Chris jumps in, I think I need to clarify that sometimes, men are said to be physical, which is true. We are very physical in the sense that you could leave the office really exhausted, and then the minute you reach downstairs, you see this, and then you're thinking, wow. So your life changes for that temporary moment. That would not happen to a woman. She'll come off the office with all those troubles and head home with all those troubles until she finds a friend. And then they start sharing. And by the time you're getting home, she's offloaded, which we don't do. We'd rather offload on alcohol or whatever else. Yeah, but I don't know. Chris always takes to the hills
when it comes to that. Chris, what's your take on that?
Definitely some stereotyping going on.
Okay.
This idea that a woman is completely trapped by her emotions, that she can't be physical if her emotional state's wrong. Lots of evidence to show that's not really true. If she starts being physical, she will become aroused. It will overcome her.
But are they naturally able to overcome that emotional instability at that point to become physical?
If they choose to. It's as simple as that. Lots of couples run into this trap. they say to themselves, I'm in a bad mood, therefore I'm not going to do it tonight. They could say to themselves, I'm in a bad mood, so it'd actually be quite a good idea to make love tonight. You see what I mean? It's a choice. It really is a choice. And it's the Nike advert. Just do it.
Just do it.
Your moods reflect your behavior, not the other way around. So if, for example, you have a ritual in the house, which is that at some point during the evening, the two of you sit down on the sofa and you start being nice to one another, that's going to change the whole scenario, because all of a sudden the moods change, because the ritual is that we sit down and we are nice to one another. Couples who do that have a tendency to have a very busy sex life, because after that half hour on the sofa and they head off to the bedroom, things are all different.
Okay.
The stereotype works in reverse for men. Dead right. The stereotype for men is, see a skirt, whoosh.
You're good to go.
You're good to go. Well, what he said is true. As the guy comes roaring down the stairs from the office, he sees this pretty girl. Yes, he's attracted. Yes, he says, wow, isn't she lovely? Will it turn into something physical? Well, it depends on his stress level. It depends on what else is happening in his life. He's just as likely to be caught by that problem as his wife. The two of them are remarkably similar in this, despite everything that you hear.
So those are merely stereotypes, and men
You
are
see the
also
difference, Michael, is this guy who comes rolling down the stairs. If it was a lady and she's carried all that stress from the office, you dare say hello. I don't know if Chris will disagree with me, but the minute you say hello, she'll give you those daggers and you have to just quickly, withdraw into your shell. But if it's a guy, he comes down and he meets this hot-looking girl, and then she says, hi. The guy probably
suddenly he beams up and
he
he's smiling.
brightens up and his life changes. But I think based on what he's saying, women are very rational in terms of sexual behavior, in terms of, romance. Men don't rationalize. That's the problem we have. And that's not a stereotype, Chris.
It's a fact.
It's a
now,
fact.
When you say rationalize, what do you mean? What do you mean? How women
a woman can get home and use the preacher's idiom, leave your troubles at the door. Yeah, and then she'll do that and then sit with you on the couch and tell you, forget my day. Let's just have tea together. And she'll try and rationalize the evening with you and for you. Yeah, but the guy who's just been abused by the neighbor will come in and, blaze at the child, at the woman, and of course he'll try to calm down knowing he's in his house, but men don't leave it at the door as such. We have that problem.
I would have thought it's the other way around, Chris, because I thought when women come home and you ask her, how was your day? She might even start sobbing and you think, oh, what has gone wrong? Yet it's not because of what's happening now, but maybe the kind of day that she has had throughout.
I think people vary a lot, first of all, and one of the problems is that men vary more than people realize. There are some men who totally compartmentalize their lives.
Right.
They close the living room door as they go out in the morning, and that's it. Home life is out of their mind for the rest of the day. They come back in the evening. The moment they come into the house, they've forgotten about work. There are some men like that. There are plenty of men who are not like that, who do what women do, who tend to hold everything around in their minds the whole day. They're thinking about their spouse, they're thinking about the vicious custody battle that's going on in their life, or whatever it is, it's dominating their lives. So I think the stereotypes are overwhelmed by the variability in people. So for example, there are two classic differences in men. There's a group of men who are enormously physical. They're the guys who hang around in bars. They're the ones with the big jaw and the muscles and the seduction techniques. And they're up for it any day of the week, any hour of the day. And at the other extreme, you've got men who are much more like the ladies in that they are much more involved in their emotions. And they certainly can't have sex just at the drop of a hat. It all depends on
there has to be an emotional attachment to it. Okay.
There's this famous Italian doctor, Cesare Lombroso, who carried out this study about the relationship between the physique and criminality. And he was saying, those guys with square jaws and funny-looking foreheads, they're more likely to be deviant. Believe you me, when you pick up that thread and put it into relationships, works the same.
It is.
The guys who are all physical and bully.
It's all at the end.
Very aggressive.
At the end of the day, it's just testosterone levels. If I've got the jaw and the brow and the shoulders, it's telling the world that I've got this huge high testosterone level. I'm also likely to be violent, criminal,
True.
join the army.
But isn't that dangerous then to stereotype somebody based on just the way they look?
No, the amazing thing is that the
it's
girls
not
are
a
actually
stereotype.
attracted to them, and so they exploit that opportunity. That when he stands at the bar, you know, the timid you who's come from class looking like a nerd will be avoided by the girls, but you might be a much better man. Yeah, but when they look at this guy bulging out of his t-shirt.
But you can see what's going on, can't you? These are real signals. I cannot lie about my testosterone levels because it's written in my eyebrows and my jaw and all the other things I do, you know? So it's a real signal. And in different circumstances, women are attracted to high and low testosterone men. At the time of their ovulation, when they're really going for it,
The hormones are raging.
when the hormones are raging, they're really attracted to the big testosterone guy. When they're feeling much more rational, they're much more attracted to the other guy because actually, of course, his behavior is much better. You know, so everybody gets a chance in life.
All right, just a quick reminder of what we're talking about this morning, and in case you're at home and you'd like to ask a question, the numbers are now displaying on your screen. Feel free to call. You can also tweet your question, and that's at Michael G. Gitonga. Today, we're talking about the connection between emotional and physical satisfaction or delivery, if I may call it that. And there's a stereotype that we're trying to demystify here with Chris and Ken, and it's a stereotype that men are not emotionally connected to their physical performance per se, whereas women are heavily connected. But of course, Chris saying that that is a stereotype, and that is not the case. Now, Chris, now that you say the big jaw and the big guy is a sign of testosterone, is that an indication for the ladies to know that this may be a no-go zone? Because, I mean, at some point they're going to be attracted to that.
Of course they are. I mean, that's how that guy operates. He has all the hormones, he has all the behaviors. There's no point in him trying to pretend to be anything else. So he acts the way he is. Now, a lot of girls, especially at particular times in their lives, when they're younger, for example, before they really want to settle down and have a family, where it's important that the guy is stable and behaves well, they are hugely attracted to that guy. So this guy has an absolute field day in his 20s. You know, the girls are all lapping it up. Later on, when the girls are beginning to settle down, they think, I like that guy, he's really fun, great night out, but I don't trust him, because they know he's likely to cheat, the list's endless. But we all fit in our little slot in humanity, you know, that's how the world works. This guy is the rogue. An awful lot of women, you read the magazines, when they're talking about, oh, awful men, they're basically talking about those rogues. The guys who are much more, well, dare I say it, dull.
Polished?
Not polished? All right, okay. The bank clerks, you know, they're at the other end of the spectrum. But they're boring. They don't set your hormones racing, do they?
True,
you know, but
true.
they're likely to bring the rent home every month.
Yeah, in fact, William Bellinger, there's a book called The Caveman, and you know, he actually says that for some reason women get attracted to the caveman at the expense of you, the gentleman, who's trying to be really nice and dropping all the hints of being a polished character, and you end up with, you know, this boring woman who could have done better, you know, in that level of interaction. But if you think about it, I think Chris is absolutely right. They do this up to a certain age. Yeah, and for them, it's that fun. You know, that's why the rugby player will be more exciting than the physical, than the atomic scientist. Because at that age, the woman is literally looking for that caveman to hem her in. You know, but at a certain point in her life, she starts thinking, you know, that's it for me.
And I guess there's also experience. Once you've experienced this caveman, you realize that
you're looking for the opposite.
Right.
Yeah, because he's more likely, like Chris says, this guy is more likely to stray, not because of his own psyche, but because of the way he is as a person. Everybody comes flocking to him when he goes to play football or rugby or whatever it is with his sports car. Yeah, and then you who's there with your nice little job and, you know, carrying your folders, you end up being saluted, which is not right for the woman. She wants a bit of fun and excitement. And that's why also sports cars fade out, even with men. They fade out with you from about 35, you know, you're thinking, nah, I need to buy that Bentley. That's how it works.
And be more polished and settled.
Yes.
All right, Chris, now when it comes to identifying one who possibly is not performing physically because of an emotional issue, because sometimes they have a tendency to snowball, and if they're not dealt with, it can end up now becoming a very cold relationship. How does one do that? How do you identify that?
Well, I mean, the long and short of it, as always, is you've got to talk about things. I mean, if something's going wrong in a marriage and you both assume you know what's going on, you pretend you're reading each other's minds, chances are lots of mistakes are going to be made. So the stereotypes all come into play. You know, she thinks he's obviously having an affair. He thinks she's obviously moody. You know, now if they're in the habit of sitting on the sofa a lot and start actually saying, what's wrong? Can I help? You know, tell me about your day, sort of thing. They're going to find out what the real reason is. And once they know what the real reasons are, you can deal with it. I mean, this is the hallmark of a really good relationship, that there is a good balance between emotional relationship to hold together. But if there's a poor balance between emotional and physical intimacy, the relationship will not be as successful. So anytime the physical side of things is beginning to fade for some reason, crank up the emotional side and you'll find out why.
Yeah, actually, Michael, you know the problem we have with most relationships, if you look at family trips, you go there, Naivasha, Mombasa, wherever you go, and you come back, everybody's leafing through the pictures and you're doing that post-mortem for the vacation. And you talk about it and say, oh, here you were being stupid, here you did this and you did that. We never do that with our sexualities. Yeah, you go into bed and you're this couple that looks all loving, but after that is done, nobody raises the topic. Are you okay? How was that? You know, we never carry out that post-mortem. And I think if you're that kind of couple that can actually talk about it, I know men don't like that topic because they always believe they're the mandingos, you know, but when you actually raise it and say, hey, tonight you are really lousy, and I think it's because of this and this, that guy will probably get to learn. Yeah, but the problem we have is we don't say it. You know, so the woman goes to complain to her friends. Oh, Sophia, you know, my husband has just become a mess these days, you know. But you don't tell the guy, so if he thinks he's okay, we really need to carry on.
He assumes all is going
on. Yeah.
In fact, the hallmark of a couple with a really good sex life is that they talk about it a lot.
Yes.
They talk about it on the sofa. They talk about it over breakfast. You know, there are hints going on all the time about what they're going to be doing later in the day. And they talk and laugh about it while it's happening. You know, sex is not silent for a successful couple. They are chattering.
You tease each other.
Yes, they tease each other, and they're having fun. And it's not a big performance issue, you know, done in silence. It's exactly the
sacred, you know, emotional way. So, Ken, how does one now open up this discussion if maybe you're not used to that as a couple? Possibly you have barriers, maybe, and some of these may be out of upbringing and the fact that we think that, you know, talking about sex is a taboo.
Yeah, I know socialization plays quite a big part of that. But whenever I meet individuals or couples in trouble, I tell them, you know what, raise the topic. Just bring it up. Yeah, and sometimes you don't even have to, like, be shy about it because, so to speak, quote unquote, you're in the dark. Yeah, so you the man can actually ask, how was that? Yeah, and then if she's honest, she'll learn to come out of the shell and start telling you, hey, you know, in fact, it's good you've asked. Today was the worst in our life.
Although there's also the other side of it that she's
very negative today.
she may be trying to stroke your ego per se and tell you it was good.
Big mistake.
You know, what he says is right. Talk about it. But it can be strikingly difficult. And it is, as he says, often about socialization. What happened when you were a child? If the first time you mention where do babies come from to your mother and she goes, "Brrr," you know, no, you've just discovered that this is a taboo subject. You don't talk about it. And if every time you ask a question or something in the family, it all goes frosty, big problem later on in life. So one of the biggest things you can do for your children is to be completely open about sexuality. If every time your children want to ask you a question, you talk about it, and you use the real words. You don't use silly words, you know what I mean? Because what you're basically saying, these words are taboo. You know? So teach children to talk about sex, and they will be much more successful couples when they grow up. But now, we're a generation where our parents didn't do that. So an awful lot of couples, when things go wrong, and they want to talk to their spouse about sex, it's very difficult. They can't get the first word out, they keep putting it off. When they do talk about it, it's all platitudes. They want to ask things like, what do you really want to do? And he can't ask, and she can't tell him. I really want to be spanked. No, I can't say that. I can't say that, you know, he'll think I'm a what's it. You know?
I know.
You just can't talk about it.
Yeah, actually, the sense of adventure is a lot of times misses out in couples. Yeah, that the guy could be thinking of all sorts of crazy things, but he dare not say it. And same thing with the lady. The lady in a marriage might come home thinking like, hey, I saw something on Kama Sutra, let's try it out. Yeah, and the guy will come with all these questions like, why?
Where did you learn this from?
That just kills it, you know. So, but I tell people that when you come together, there are two places where you can easily reverse that socialization. That's media, like if you're watching TV or watching a movie, you don't blindfold the child and say, hey, don't watch that part. Yeah, talk to them about it. Same thing with the Bible. You know, my daughter the other day comes and asks me, Daddy, which is the most sexually explicit verse in the Bible? And you think of all sorts of crazy things. Is it Hosea with the prostitute? Is it Samson carrying these guys away to the hill? No, you sit there and you say, hey, let me look for an answer, I'll give it to you. And then you come out and give her a straight answer about it. What do you think? Then she'll, by the time they're asking, they already know. You know, like he says, if you keep hemming her out, she'll probably realize taboo topic, but she goes to Google, she goes to all these other places, and she gets her answers. So you better sit there as an egalitarian parent, talk to her about it. By the time she's meeting her husband, she'll be like, you know, Daddy used to say this, let's talk about it.
It's no longer a taboo. Chris, how does one break that ice that you may have, given that you've been brought up in an environment, like now, our generation, our parents would not really talk about it. So when your child comes to talk to you about it, initially it's extremely difficult.
I mean, where children are concerned, you just have to grit your teeth and tell yourself you're going to do this.
Get it out. Yeah.
Get it out. And to your utter amazement, explaining to a small child about where babies come from, bearing in mind, if the conversation is starting when they're very young, they don't want the full gory details, age-appropriate information.
Yeah, you have to
suddenly discover that it's actually quite easy to talk about it, and it's actually easier to use the proper words than to make crazy words up and things like that. It's much more difficult for the 35-year-olds who have not had that background. They find it very difficult to start the conversation. And just start talking hardly works for them. So some, of course, will end up talking to counsellors. The marriage is so rocky, they go to the counsellor. A wise counsellor instantly spots what's going on and starts them talking. To their utter amazement, it's quite good fun talking about it, so they go home and talk. But you can also do it, as he says, you can make sure that you watch one or two movies where some conversations are happening on screen or some action is happening on screen, and then start talking about it.
It breaks the ice.
There is the famous book, you know, 50 Shades of Grey. It's not an accident that they've sold 50 million copies. There are lots of women who've left that lying around because it's a grand opportunity to start talking. So it goes on. Find something to break the ice. The reality is that once you have broken the ice and you've started realizing, especially with the internet, that anything you can imagine, someone else is already talking about it. You can get going then.
Yeah, actually, when you read books on marriage, most people, the wise ones, will tell you that the success of coupling actually starts from childhood. That if your baby walks up to you as a parent and asks you, why is it that I have one bed and the two of you are so huge and you're using one bed? Yeah, then you just start giving all sorts of weird stories as to why you're sharing a bed with our mother. You know, be able to use that opportunity to talk to that child and say, you know what, EBCD, this is how it works. And that baby will grow up with that open mind, beginning to realize, oh, okay, so adults do this, adults are like that, and they share a bed and stuff like that. And when you open up that child, believe you me, when they enter that relationship later in their life, when they're 21s, oh, they're very easy to relate to.
It even happens earlier, you know. I mean, one of the classic debates is, should you give sex instruction to children? You get an awful lot of people who say the sooner you start giving sex instruction to children, they'll become promiscuous. All sorts of evil things will happen. It's exactly the reverse. You get a country like Sweden where it's in the curriculum, it starts at age practically nothing, and it goes all the way through. It's got the lowest teenage pregnancy rate in the world. Go to Texas where they are really uptight about sex education, and it's got the highest. You see the problem?
Yes.
If you talk about these things, you create a skillful person who can conceptualize what's going on in their mind and talk about it with their partners.
Okay, solutions. Ken, for a couple who may be going through a dry spell, for want of a better way to put it, a dry spell sexually, and maybe it's been caused by emotional instability or emotional issues, where do they start from? Because, I mean, you cannot just go to the bed and, you know, kick off that conversation. You need maybe to find the root.
Yeah, and you don't swallow Viagra as well. I think what happens is change scenery. I think that's one of the first things I always tell people: get away from the riffraff of your home and just go somewhere. Yeah, and it always does magic when you're on that beach with someone you've been with for the last 20 years. It changes quite a number of things. But the other thing that happens is when you change your routines, You don't, sometimes you can't afford to travel because you don't have time, maybe you don't have the money. But when you change your routines, even at home, because we are so rigid with our routines. You come from work, you're sitting on the same sofa every day, the way Chris sits in the center here every week, you know, and then nothing changes. Yeah, once in a while, go sit on that floor and tell Mama, take that seat. I want to watch you sit there and take, you know, do stuff.
Do something.
Yeah.
I'll take a call from Kitengela. Good morning.
Hi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, go right ahead with your comment or question.
Okay, we have been married for 1 year, and we've been having some difficulties with communication, and it has affected our intimacy.
Okay.
I have really tried to initiate for us to talk about it, but I will only raise my issues and he will say he's okay.
He'll say?
He will say he's fine. So I will say what I like him to do and what I don't like him to do. So when I ask him what he wants me to do, he says everything is okay. So I have been having a problem with that. And as well as solving our issues, he never talks about issues at all.
Okay.
So we will almost go for on silent treatment for like 2 weeks. And then coming back to intimacy is really difficult and it's just a disaster.
Okay.
What should I do to break the ice? I have really tried everything.
All right. We'll
Yes.
answer your question shortly. We also have Winnie in Kisumu. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, go right ahead. Winnie in Kisumu?
Yeah, Winnie in Kisumu.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been dating this man for 2 years. He rarely communicates and can go silent for 2 months if I don't initiate the talk.
Okay.
I've talked to him about it. He claims it is his character. We stay distantly, but can go for 5 months minus meeting me.
5 months without?
He can go for 5 months minus meeting me.
Okay.
He says he's busy.
Okay.
So I'm so confused. I love him. I've done some research, and surprisingly, he is not cheating on me.
Okay. And he's your boyfriend, is your fiancé?
He's my fiancé.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Winnie. 2 questions there, more or less to do with communication. This is one.
Chris, take the first one.
Yeah, you can take the first one, Chris. He never opens up. He never seems to talk about it.
Yes.
He says everything is okay.
I mean, that is how men are socialized. If you watch boys playing in a schoolyard, you can see them being taught by their peers not to admit to any issues, not to open up, not to appear vulnerable, and so on. And all the way through their growing up period, boys, men are socialized to keep quiet, keep their thoughts to themselves. And of course, then they get married, and they have to coexist with this woman who wants to talk about it. So getting past that reserve is quite difficult.
So what does she do?
Well, the first thing is don't ambush him. If you just grab him as he walks in and say, we need to talk about so-and-so, instantly he'll be off to the bar, or whatever his avoidance technique is. Give him warning. Say to him, I'd like to talk about so-and-so. Can we go out to the coffee shop and talk about it tomorrow? In other words, he's got some time to think about it. Be very careful when you start to talk about it, that you talk about things that he can't object to, like talk about your own feelings rather than telling him that I don't like that you do this. If you accuse him of things, he'll clam up straight away. But he can't argue with your feelings, they're your feelings. So if he begins to understand the problem and that you're seeing it from your point of view and not criticizing him, he will slowly start to talk.
Okay.
But it's not easy. You know, I'm not going to pretend that, you know, she can just simply do it tomorrow and it'll work. She might have to try several times. She might have to involve a professional.
A professional. Ken,
The lady
the second
from
one, and
Kisumu,
very quickly.
yes, she's
very
just
briefly, we
proved
need to
what you
wind
were
up.
saying earlier about the stereotypes, that the assumption would be that because this guy doesn't come onto her regularly, doesn't visit, he would
Must
be
be
cheating.
cheating.
But she has done, quote-unquote, her research and found out the guy's not cheating. So I think the modern woman takes the bull by the horns, literally speaking. You get out there and get your man on his feet Yeah, the modern woman will come at you, and I think that's what she needs to do. Don't let the guy stay away for 5 months, because then that's not a relationship if he's not talking to you. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, that was my overriding thought. You know, men are very direct in relationships. If he loves her, he'll be with her.
Yes.
All
And
the
communicate.
time. And
So that
communicate.
should be an indication
It's
of
a
his
big-
feeling
he's
about
not
her.
fully in it.
It's a big red flag that says,
Yeah.
actually, he's not that into her. I don't know what's going on in the rest of his life. He might actually just not be into relationships full stop. Might have nothing to do with her. But one way or another, a guy who can disappear for days, let alone months, is not really in the relationship.
So for 5 months, that's our warning bell. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have to wind up right there. Ken Oko, who is a sociologist, and Chris Hart, who is a relationship expert. Thank you for helping us out there. And now I will include Sophia into our shot, and yeah, there she goes. And Sophia,
There she
yes,
goes. Where
there
has
she
she
goes.
gone?
She had disappeared, but she's reappeared. I call it the magic of TV. And yeah, your sentiments and comments on that.
Great conversation. Great conversation. Why are you looking at me like...
Your perspective?
Look at Chris is like...
Yeah, we're waiting to hear. We thought you know,
No.
you'd be part of us here. But anyway, there you go.
Some of those things, you know, I think that now I'm here, my capacity as a journalist, there are things I do not want to say, but I have some strong feelings about some of these issues, which I will put for post-show discussions.
You could comment on behalf of somebody else, not as yourself.
That will be very obvious. Not that you've said it, I'll be like, you know, there's a friend of mine who once told me that, yeah, so it will be rather obvious. But no, great conversation. I think it's important when, you know, you get to break it down for people, because a lot of people are in all kinds of issues and don't realize, you know, where to place whatever it is. And I think men and women are so different, and it's great when you get to hear from men. You need to be having a woman, man. For us women.
Don't we have one?
Well,
Don't
not
we
me,
have
not
one
a relationship person.
No, actually, we did have one, and for some reasons or the other, she's not been able to come for some time, but
Yeah.
yes, we're working on that.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, great conversation also on the newsroom, and expounding on some of those stories, and especially the coverage for athletics. And it was interesting to also note some of the things that we maybe did not want to talk about. But of course, I think it was Al Jazeera that took it up and talked about the CNN,
Yes.
and talked about the doping issues, which is of course something we must address as much as we are successful. I was also, as you're going through the conversation, I saw something that's going through. I'm yet to verify, but apparently Donald Trump was also he didn't have very kind words for Kenyans, saying that we are all cheats and cons, and America actually won.
Oh, really?
IAAF. But of course,
Yeah.
my comment to that was, don't let anybody's negative feeling kill your positive dream.
How about this, Mr. Donald? We trumped all over y'all. So
Oh, I
that's
like
how
that.
I put it. Yeah, we trumped over you all, and that's why we wrap it up. Well, I was also seeing on Twitter just a few seconds ago, we've got you covered. You know how we start the show and say we've got
yeah.
you covered, your morning covered? Kidero, the governor, is saying we've got you covered in as far as an El Nino is concerned. El Nino rain. So I'm looking forward to see how that will look like, but hey, just some of the interesting things I've been having a look at as well.
That's why we wind it up. Thank you so much for joining us right here. For those of us on KTN News, stand by for the news coming up at 9 o'clock. And those at KTN home, have yourselves a wonderful day. It's been great having you on board. Have a good day.
Bye.